Before we get into the video, I want you to know you can catch the extended version of this documentary on my streaming service Nebula, brought to you through CuriosityStream for about $1.25 a month. Freddie Gibbs was born in 1982 in Gary, a small city in Indiana. In the 50s and 60s, Gary was a prosperous steel town with lots of jobs and opportunity. But in recent decades, it's lost more than 55% of its former population, suffering, like many American cities, from unemployment, decaying infrastructure, little to no funding for schools. All of this is to say, Freddie Gibbs grew up poor. His dad was a cop in Gary, one of the worst paying police departments in the entire country, and he was fired in the 90s, leaving their family financially unstable for a long time, which led to Freddie getting into crime as a teenager. After high school, Freddie got into a university a few hours from Gary on an athletic scholarship. During a now deleted interview from 10 years ago, he said that he wasn't interested in academics and he would spend all of his time not playing football, committing crimes. Anyway, he got kicked out of college and went right back to Gary to get into more trouble. Specifically, 2 serious criminal charges within 6 months. A judge gave him 2 choices. He could go to trial and face years in jail, or he could go to the army. Freddie chose boot camp for 6 months, but he was eventually kicked out of there too for smoking weed. Back in Gary, Freddie met a record producer named Fingerroll. According to Freddie, he was the only guy in all of Gary who had recording equipment at his house. So the first set of Freddie Gibbs projects were released 17 years ago when he was 22 years old. Today, the only place you can really find and listen to these mixtapes is on YouTube, on a fan channel called Freddie Gibbs Music. So I did just that, and I listened to all of his mixtapes and albums from Full Metal Jacket Volume 1 through ESGN, more than a dozen projects in total. And look, I've listened to a lot of early hip-hop projects over the years running this channel. Kendrick's first mixtapes, JID's early work, whatever BS Travis Scott made in 2010, I've heard all of it. So I mean it when I say no one was as good at rapping when they were 22 as Freddie Gibbs. Freddie describes his early experience with rapping as therapeutic. He said, "I was going through some things in the neighborhood where I was beefing with some guys. Being in the studio was kind of therapeutic. It gave me the opportunity to get stuff off my chest." And barely 2 years later, Freddie was offered a record deal by an intern at Interscope. By the way, that intern is Freddie's manager to this day and has been for the last 15 years. Anyway, Freddie signed the deal immediately and moved to LA to work on his debut record. Suddenly, he had unlimited access to acclaimed producers like Just Blaze and The Alchemist and his own studio equipment. But then it all fell apart. The intern's boss left Interscope, and the label eventually decided not to proceed with Freddie's debut record. In fact, they dropped him as a client entirely. At this point, I think it's fair to say Freddie had a difficult choice to make. He could have gone back to Indiana, gotten back into his old ways. He could have given up on music entirely. It would have been easy for him to lose his passion and fade away. But Freddie Gibbs has never been one to take the easy way out. At first, he was angry. He didn't want to rap anymore. But he took some time, made a few mixtapes, moved around the country from LA to Atlanta to Indiana and back, and then it came, his first big break. The Miseducation of Freddie Gibbs, a mixtape themed around Lauryn Hill's legendary album, made up mostly from songs recorded during his short relationship with Interscope. Anyway, a year later, Freddie had enough buzz to be named a XXL freshman for 2010, alongside rappers like Wiz Khalifa, Big Sean, J. Cole, and Nipsey Hussle. After a brief period signed to Young Jeezy's label, Freddie founded his own label, ESGN, and released his debut album of the same name in 2013. ESGN wasn't received very well by critics. One critic wrote that Freddie had, over time, become complacent with his place in the industry. He had a big enough fan base, they said, but it didn't really seem like he was interested in expanding it. They wrote, "It's the sound of a rapper more than happy enough to maintain his narrow lane after being burned by the industry. Someone who's lost the ambition to leave his comfort zone, at least for the time being." But Freddie Gibbs wasn't giving up. Released just 9 months after ESGN, Pinata would change Freddie's music, career, and life forever. Let's put it this way. Freddie Gibbs was doing well before he teamed up with Madlib to make Pinata, but his audience was limited. He was an extremely talented rapper from a small town in the Midwest, and you could easily hear that in his production. But Pinata, these beats were big budget. They were timeless. They were metropolitan. Freddie had unlocked a whole new audience. Suddenly, hipsters in Brooklyn wanted to own Freddie's albums on vinyl. People were analyzing his music on Reddit. He had finally found a producer that could match his energy. And 6 years later, sure enough, Freddie Gibbs has been nominated for a Grammy. This is how he did it. I think the fundamental change in Freddie's music before 2014 and after 2014 was presentation. Like I said before, he's still the same talented rapper he has been for many years, but everything else was leveled up completely. Album covers, production, music videos, his presentation became more appealing to different demographics. Slowly but surely, Freddie Gibbs was going to leave the underground and become a hip-hop staple. A lot of it, I think, is thanks to Madlib. Madlib doesn't work with many producers, but when he does, people usually stop and listen. And even though it would be another 5 years before Freddie worked with Madlib again, the projects following Pinata did great too. Shadow of a Doubt was a darker record with hard-hitting bass and groovy melodic flows from Freddie. My favorite tracks from that record are Rearview and Insecurities. In the words of fans and critics, Freddie was finally starting to leave Gary behind and use his music to search for something more. And it was going great. And then disaster struck. In the summer of 2016, Freddie was arrested in France and charged by the Austrian government for drugging and raping a woman in Vienna the year before. After being held in Austria for 4 months and faced with 10 years in jail, his accuser admitted she never had sex with Freddie. He was cleared of all charges, and having proved himself innocent, he understandably wanted nothing more than to put the incident behind him. His first project upon returning home from Europe was You Only Live Twice. Releasing just 6 months after he got out of jail, You Only Live Twice is one of Freddie's most concise albums at just 30 minutes long, but it's also one of his most emotional. My favorite tracks are Homesick and 20 Karat Jesus. In the words of a critic from the 405 magazine, You Only Live Twice is a reflection of past mistakes, a declaration of dreams for his family's future, and a timestamp for the strenuous reality of an artist who nearly lost it all on his way to gaining everything. It ended up a dark, introspective project, one of Freddie's best by far. After releasing You Only Live Twice, Freddie almost never mentioned the sexual assault charges in public or in his music again. Just a year later, Freddie was back with another hard-hitting project, a 25-minute album produced mostly by Kenny Beats. I think Freddie is best described as a looser and more trap-inspired project than his previous work, and it went great, reaching number 142 on the Billboard charts. I think, though, Freddie wanted to make another smash hit like Pinata, so he teamed up with Madlib again, this time on a project called Bandana. Bandana was an even bigger success than Pinata before it. It charted in something like 20 countries, peaking at number 21 in the US and number 10 on the hip-hop charts. Anyway, people really loved Bandana. Understandably, it's a beautiful record. It showed up on dozens of year-end lists from magazines and blogs, and that appreciation was amplified even more when people found out that Madlib had produced the entire record on an iPad. We can't go too in-depth here, but it was clear in 2019 that Freddie had found a winning formula, and he wasn't going to give up on it. Just a year later, he did it again. In the words of Freddie for Complex magazine, once we did Fetty with Currency, I was like, man, if I could bring that same magic for a whole album myself, it's gonna go off. So together with The Alchemist, Freddie made Alfredo. And it just might be the quintessential Freddie Gibbs record. At just 10 tracks long, Alfredo leaves no room for filler. It's also deeply personal for Freddie, probably his most personal album since You Only Live Twice. In Freddie's words, I had a lot of time to reflect while making this project. I stepped back because I got to a different kind of notoriety after making Bandana. The rush of people that were saying they didn't like my music at first, but now we're all on the bandwagon. It gave me time to really be like, do I even want to rap anymore? Rap to me had become so superficial. Today, Freddie is in an interesting place. Yeah, he's critically acclaimed, his music is charting. He was nominated for a Grammy this year. He's making amazing music, top shelf music videos, he's on Joe Rogan. People love him more than ever. People love him more than ever, especially for his thoughtful, well-spoken, funny persona. But he's still got a lot of room to grow. He's never had a big hit song. He doesn't sell tons of records. But it's like, who cares? People online compare Freddie to Kendrick. They're already arguing about whether or not he could be the greatest rapper alive, especially while rappers like Kendrick, J. Cole, Kanye have all been quiet over the last few years. In the words of his longtime manager, the Grateful Dead didn't have a hit until the late 80s, and then they never did again. But they had a huge fan base that loved them because they were the realest artists around. That's how I've always seen Freddie's career, says Benjamin Lambert. The Dead might not always hit the right note, but they were always themselves and they took big risks. Freddie isn't afraid to take a risk, and we knew that if you always do great stuff, people will eventually notice. And people have certainly noticed. In addition to being nominated for a Grammy, which, by the way, he should have won, Freddie was recently cast as the lead role in an upcoming movie about a rapper turned farmer called Down with the King, something he's been talking about doing for years. Plus, he's working hard on another record with Madlib, a third entry into their trilogy titled Montana. Fans are more excited than ever, and I think one thing's for certain. Sooner or later, people are going to start to realize Freddie might just be one of the greatest to ever do it. This has been Volksgeist. Thank you for watching. If you're a big fan of Freddie Gibbs, I recommend checking out the extended version of this video on Nebula. It's a much more complete documentary featuring music and extended discussions. You see, YouTube's copyright rules are completely outdated, and I'm not allowed to play songs by or interviews with the artist I'm talking about. In fact, when I do, YouTube takes all of the money I might earn off a video. And I think this limitation makes my documentaries a lot less interesting. And because of this rule, some of my most popular videos, like Understanding Juke's WRLD, Frank Ocean, or Travis Scott, don't make me any money, leading to thousands of dollars in lost revenue. So that's one of the big reasons why my friends and I started Nebula. We wanted a place where we could make our best content, something that just isn't really possible on YouTube. So if you didn't know before, I post all of my videos on Nebula first, and I post the extended cut there too, featuring scenes that just wouldn't be allowed on YouTube. Anyway, here's some more info about Nebula. Nebula is home to tons of original content, like documentaries and game shows, including my own documentary about synths and popular music, and fascinating videos by people like Adam Neely, Polyphonic, Middle 8, Charles Cornell, and many more. And here's the thing, Nebula costs less than $15 a year. Plus, on Nebula, there are no ads, not even this one. But what does this have to do with CuriosityStream? Well, as the go-to source for the best documentaries on the internet, they love educational content and educational creators. So that's why making this bundle made so much sense in the first place. Personally, one of my favorite CuriosityStream documentaries is Capturing Woodstock, a fascinating look at the 1969 Woodstock Music Festival, an event that accidentally changed music and the world forever. So because CuriosityStream and Nebula go so well together, we worked out a deal where if you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below, not only will you get CuriosityStream, you'll also get Nebula for free. To be clear, that Nebula subscription isn't a trial. It's free for as long as you're subscribed to CuriosityStream. And for a limited time, CuriosityStream is offering 26% off all of their annual plans. That's less than $15 a year for both CuriosityStream and Nebula. So if you click the link in the description and get CuriosityStream for 26% off, you'll get Nebula included for free. It's a great way to support my channel and educational content directly for less than $15 a year. Just click on the link below or go to curiositystream.com/Volksgeist. Clicking on the link really helps out my channel.